I think when you first start to play league football, thinking about being a 10-year player is a long way off. But as you go along and you meet the people and you understand the importance of the club in league football and the importance that you can play in the improvement of the Collingwood Football Club, just seems to drag more and more out of you.
Oh, look, it's a great honour. I think one thing about playing for Collingwood for a long period of time is that you're always under a bit of pressure. Not just from in a club, but also other clubs sort of, that hate Collingwood sort of situation where they're always going out to beat you, and if you can perform for 10 years and perform well and consistently, I think it's a feather in the cap.
Oh no, look, if you last 10 years at a club, you know that they've got to have a good character, and the four of them are great guys. They've been great players for the club, all going to become life members, and you can't last 10 years at a football club without having a strong character.
Good old Collingwood forever, they know how to play the game. Side by side they stick together to uphold the Magpies' name.
In 1996, Collingwood honours four of its most beloved sons. A quartet of Magpies who've served their club with honour and with loyalty for 10 glorious years. The skipper, Gavin Brown, a dual Copeland Trophy winner, renowned for his courage and the quality of play that he brings to this most famous club in the land. Gavin Crosisca, his deputy, a youngster who came from football's far frontier in Queensland and was rewarded with a place in the 1990 premiership side. Mighty Mick McGuane, a back-to-back Copeland Trophy winner and one of the most exciting players in the game. And Alan Richardson, a tremendous player who was robbed by injury of the chance to join his three mates here in the 1990 Grand Final triumph. Brown, Crosisca, McGuane and Richardson, four Magpies who've been honoured with a testimonial in 1996.
See the barrackers are shouting as old barrackers should. All the premierships are cakewalk for the good old Collingwood. All the premierships are cakewalk for the good old Collingwood.
At Melbourne Park in May, more than 700 of the black and white faithful gathered to pay tribute to these men. The keynote speaker, 1990 Premiership coach Lee Matthews.
The 9 years of my coaching life we shared with these four players, and you do tend to have obviously a close relationship is the correct word, but you certainly have a lot to do with each other and seeing how these players react sort of under the pressure of AFL football. I suppose really one can only do it in alphabetical order. And B, for Gavin Brown, my first memories, I think it's worth talking about the first memories of these players, and my first memory of Brownie, of course they played, Gavin Brown, Gavin Crosisca and Mick McGuane played in the under-19 premiership of 1986, and I'd seen them play there, but the first game that Brownie played for the Collingwood senior team was a night game. It was at Waverley at the start of the 1987 season. I'm not exactly sure even who the opponent was, but I must say, and as Keith Burns said, to my horror, when I first saw Brownie play at that level, I thought he was pretty timid. He was thin, and as Burnsy said, it's something that it's very easy to confuse lack of confidence in a player for lack of aggression at the ball. But at that stage, Gavin at the start, when he was 17 years of age, and pretty quiet sort of natural personality, wasn't the kind of gung-ho battering ram that he's become as his league career has developed.
When I was playing with Brownie, someone said to me, and I always try and get an advantage, and the one story about Brownie was that someone came up to me at night and said, never mention anything about his sisters, because his sisters are beautiful looking girls, and both, I think, married now, and I remember we were having some goal kicking practice, and I was standing on the mark, and always to get an advantage to put a bloke off, I said to Brownie, I said, did you know a few of the blokes at the club are taking your sisters out on the side? And I've never seen a bloke go more red and get more angry than what Brownie did. And I remember this day, as soon as I saw his face go like that, I just shut up. Normally I keep going, but I put him off. He missed about 5 in a row, And to this day, I've never said anything else about it. He says, but they are a fantastic family, the Browns. But I still remember that night, and I really don't forgive those blokes who gave me the wrong lead on the sisters, because I thought I was going to die, you know.
I think of Brownie in team meetings, and Brownie always had this kind of impassive look on his face in team meetings, such that I wondered whether in fact he was even listening to what I was saying, let alone whether he was understanding or was going to put it into practice. But of course the greatest reward you can get as a coach is to see your player out on the field doing exactly what you're asking him to do. And that's the way Gavin told you that he was in fact absorbing and listening to what was happening in those team meetings.
When league footballers get together and talk about the opposition players they most respect, Gavin Brown's name is always high on the list. Then again, it is hard not to respect a player who is supremely talented, exceptionally courageous and scrupulously fair. And that is Gavin Brown.
He's been such a professional athlete, I think, for the 10 years that he's been here at Collingwood, and he sets the example for the young guys. Even like when he was a 19-year-old kid, he was a skinny little fella and he was always in the gym doing the weights, and he's got the rewards now, so he's just a perfect example for young guys that are trying to make the grade now, I think.
Brown first played competitive football with Templestowe in an under-9 team called the Little Tackers. He stayed with Templestowe through to the under-17s, and though he had some reasonable success, he was no schoolboy phenomenon. Still, Collingwood had noticed him. The only problem was that he lived in Fitzroy's zone. The Lions' residential hold on him did not take effect until he turned 17. So the Pies moved in before that time and snatched him away from under Fitzroy's nose.
Well, I wasn't on their books at the age of 16 and a half years of age, and the rule back then was that if you weren't on their books, then anyone could come along and put you on their list, or on their books. So Collingwood, bloke by the name of Ian Flack, who used to work here as a recruiting officer, come down and watched me play one day down at Templestowe and just asked if I'd like to have a run in the under-17 development squad, I think it was, and I just went from there.
Were you snatched from Fitzroy? Like, had they planned to take you and just it was an oversight that they hadn't, or? No,
not that I know of. No, I obviously wasn't on their books. So no, from that point of view, no.
Who'd you barrack for?
I always barracked for Collingwood, so it turned out pretty well.
So when this guy said, "Do you want to come and have a run?" you were basically turned up here with the gear on again, ready to go.
Yeah, it was a real buzz. I remember waiting for me. Or someone said that there's a fellow from Collingwood outside the rooms waiting for me, so I was just had a grin from ear to ear, hoping that he's going to invite me down, and it turned out that way, so I was wrapped.
Brown first appeared at Victoria Park in 1984 as part of the Harry Collier under-17 training squad. He didn't get much of a go, however, because he was simply too scrawny and skinny. The next year he graduated to the under-19s, but only just. Coach Keith Byrne says Brown nearly didn't make the list because they thought he was timid.
Gavin Brown taught me a lesson, actually, as a coach, that when he was first recruited, being so thin, I used to think, oh, Gavin, he's a bit soft. And Flacky and Billy O'Keefe said, no, he's a tough player. And I couldn't see it yet, until one day in a practice match out at South Melbourne, he went where angels feared to tread. And I realised then that it was only a lack of confidence. And so he taught me a lesson, that it's not so much the person who is soft in football, it's how much confidence they do have.
He doesn't go that way, tries to go for goal, cross the face of goal, Dacos back there, and a great mark, a beauty by Brown. Sent the blood on his nose, and that was sensational.
My first training night in the seniors, I was very nervous, as you can imagine, and I didn't say much, I don't think I said anything really, but I just sort of stood there and was just waiting for things to happen and training to start and get introduced, I guess, to a few different people. So, my memories back then of my first senior training run were, gee, this is, I think I was too nervous to think of anything but to try and do the right thing and I guess not muck anything up. So yeah, it was a big step.
Given a chance in the thirds, Brown immediately set upon an intensive course of gymnasium work to build up his body. That didn't exactly turn him into gladiator material overnight, but he did manage to finish fourth in the under-19s best and fairest that year. By 1986, the year in which Brown and his young teammates won the under-19s premiership, he had begun to fill out a little, and his confidence improved accordingly.
I think you've really got to take it a step at a time and, you know, first of all, get out in the training track and be able to handle yourself out on the training track without, as I said before, without mucking anything up and having confidence in yourself to get through that. And then as time goes on, I guess it's a little bit like doing an apprenticeship. You naturally enough, you can't turn up and just back yourself 100% and, you know, think you're going to be a great senior player. You've got to do it a step at a time, and then you've got to put a few good training nights in a row in, and then obviously when you get your chance at playing a game, you consolidate there and build a bit of a base, and then you know, start backing yourself and believing in yourself.
Even at this stage, good judges around the club knew he was destined for senior football.
Brown goes to get around. Now he does, and kicks a miraculous goal.
Brownie's just taken that extra step in all areas of the game: strength, speed, endurance, skill. You know, one of the most important things he has got is a real desire to win. I think the reality of our game shows that irrespective, after a contest, there's a winner and a loser. And you can just see when you look into the eyes and the hatred that is paramount when we do lose. I think it does spur him on to, you know, an added drive the next time we compete. And Brownie, being the competitor that he is, I think he looks forward to that situation.
Handball over the top. Opportunity Richardson. Unselfishly to Russell. Russell up to the goal square. Brown marks.
Well, everything going Collingwood's way. It was Savani who came out, spilled the chest mark as Brown plays on quickly.
Brown easily goals.
I think even in those early days you could tell that you know, he was something special. His courage. We often joke, the players joke that when Brownie has to run with the flight of the ball, he gets a smile on his face. He seems to enjoy that sort of stuff, but you know, he certainly is something special.
He was in Collingwood's senior team for the opening round of 1987 and held his place for 16 games, netting the best local recruit trophy.
If we do look back then, 87, your first game was the first round?
Yeah, that's right. We played out here at Vic Park against the Sydney Swans. It was my first senior game, and I think we got flogged by about 100 points, so it was a very memorable first game.
He continued to work hard at his game and at developing his body, and the rewards came swiftly. In 1988, aged 20, he finished third in the Copeland Trophy. The next year, chosen to play for Victoria against South Australia at the MCG, Brown played a blinder from the wing to finish with the E.J. Whitten Medal for Best Victorian Player. Suddenly, everyone in footy was talking about Gavin Brown.
You know, that was, to me, you know, that was a fantastic highlight because, again, I was only young. It was only my second year of senior football, and, you know, these state selectors, the Teddy Whittens and the Graham Richmonds and the Ron Barassi sort of had the faith in me to play at state level. So that was, and I was very keen to repay that faith because you got fellas like that who, as I said, have a bit of faith in you. You're very keen to want to repay it.
Well, you certainly repaid it first up with the E.J. Whitten Medal.
Yeah, no, that was it was a great day out at the MCG. I think there was 92,000 people there, and we beat South Australia. So and to win the E.J. Whitten Medal was, yeah, you know, I didn't even realise that there was an E.J. Whitten Medal, you know, back then, and to win it sort of really didn't sink in for you know, even a couple of weeks, I don't think.
What had them talking most, and what will forever be the trademark of his career, was his unbelievable courage. There is simply no situation into which he will not put himself if the ball is up for grabs.
And kicks it to the front of the square. Oh, nearly Brown. Essendon under pressure. Brown will kick a goal. And if that doesn't bring the roof off the MCG, nothing will.
Now Williams again. Gets in. Well done by Watson to smother the hand pass. Terrific play. Kicks it long. Dean at the back. Backs himself in. Off the pack is Gavin Brown. A goal coming up for the Magpies. What for the middle?
Courage is probably your trademark. You know, Richo was saying the joke that when you've got to run with the flight of the ball, you've got a smile on your face, you enjoy that sort of thing. Now, is that sort of thing born or is it made?
Yeah, I'm not too sure. I think that, you know, I think once you're really caught up in the game and you're really switched on and involved, I think it just happens naturally. I think that, you know, if you have a day where you're not quite on, or you're thinking about other things and you're not quite 100% there, then that's when you're probably not quite as, courageous, I guess, at times. But, you know, if you are really involved in the game and really concentrating, I think it just, it just does come naturally, I think.
His courage has inspired in teammates, fans and opponents an admiration that borders on awe. It was also a major reason why he was the logical successor to Tony Shaw as Collingwood captain.
I suppose one can only say that the highest rating I think you can give to a player is to make him captain of your football club. And when Tony Shaw, one of footy's all-time great captains, I believe, retired, or was in his last year before he actually retired, that we thought Gavin was the right man to lead the Collingwood Football Club. And I think that says it all for what we believe and what we feel for Gavin as a footballer and as a man, really, and as a role model and example setter for all those at the football club. And as a footballer, I suppose, and I mentioned, I coined the phrase in one post-match press conference that Gavin really was a human battering ram. I think of a Dermot Brereton. The only difference between Brownie and Dermot is Dermot liked hurting people. And Brownie, I don't think, liked hurting people. Brownie's human battering ram approach was always at the ball.
Sadly, Brown has been dogged by injuries ever since assuming the captaincy. The years of constant battering, brought about by his fearless, almost reckless style of play, have taken their toll. So too has the physical pressure of having to play in a number of key positions.
He's kicked three, this champion Collingwood player, from 49 metres, a high floating drop punt. It floats. I think it could be another one. Yes!
You're at a stage not long ago where you're being talked about as one of Collingwood's all-time greats. You just had to continue what you were doing, and there was no doubt that would happen. And now injuries have sort of struck that down a bit. It's obviously disappointing, but does that come into your thinking that it's restricted what you wanted to do, say a couple of years ago with your goals?
Yeah, it has been frustrating, and I don't think it's probably part of the reason. But it has been a little bit disappointing, I guess, that, and I think that it happens to all footballers. You can get on a little bit of a roll for a year or two, and then for various reasons, whether it be injury or whatever, you tend to slide a little bit. And I'm very keen to try and get back up to a top level. And it's been a little bit frustrating at the moment. But through injuries or whatever, or form, it has been frustrating, but I'm very keen to try and get back up to that level.
Another factor, perhaps, the makeup of Collingwood's side, you've had to play a bit taller than you are, perhaps, been thrust into positions where you've had to play tall and cop a bit of a pounding the way you play, whereas if you had been able to sit and play a natural game on a flank or running off the wing occasionally at full forward, it might have been different?
Oh, yeah, it's hard to say that one. It is a little bit hard to say. I think that wherever you're playing on a football field, if you're giving it 100%, then you're going to cop your fair share of treatment, I guess. So I really don't think that's been the problem. I think I've had a little bit of bad luck along the way, if you can call it that. But I guess football is a physical game, and you've got to expect injuries. It's just part of the game, and if you can really limit those injuries to a bare minimum throughout the years, then the more times you can get down to the ground, the more chances you've got to play well, I think.
Brown's trouble, albeit also his great strength, is that he has always been able to play tall. He started footy as a 183-centimetre wingman, and that was where he played some of his best footy. But he has superb strong hands, wonderful anticipation, and he uses his body extremely well in marking contests. These attributes have often led coaches to play him in key forward positions. Indeed, over the years, Brown has been played just about everywhere. So valued has he become. Centre half forward, full forward, forward pocket, centre, on the ball, even fullback. Never in any of those roles has he let Collingwood down.
Just on the positions then, what's your favourite position? Where do you really like to play?
Yeah, I've been asked this a little bit, but I'm really not too sure at the moment. I mean, I would have said wing, last year or the year before, I guess. But it just changes. You know, it really does change from year to year, I guess. And you know, I think it's a challenge to play in all positions and to be able to play well in all positions. And obviously to be physically fit and at your peak, you give yourself a lot better chance to be able to play in any role. And you know, and if you're physically fit, you're more mentally attuned, and again, you give yourself a better chance. So I really couldn't say where my favourite position is at the moment. You know, I've played a lot on ball, on the wing, and you know, more recently half forward. So yeah, it's pretty hard to answer that. Yeah.
This desire to have Brown as close to the action as possible, and Brown's complete disregard for his own safety, has seen his body take a pounding. But it is easy to forget what a brilliant, free-flowing footballer he was in his first 6 or 7 years in the game. A period where it seemed he might one day be bracketed alongside Bob Rose as the club's greatest post-war player. That accolade is still to be bestowed. But even if it isn't, his position as one of the most courageous and inspirational footballers in Collingwood history is assured.
Brown, drop punt, and he has put it through.
And the highlight of the career, I suppose, the flag?
Oh yeah, 1990, certainly the highlight, you know, of my career. You play a team sport to win a premiership. That's the ultimate goal. I mean, it's good to win personal awards along the way. But, you know, and everyone says it, and it's true that that's what you're here for, with a group of blokes to go the whole distance and to win the flag. So 1990 was my greatest highlight, yeah.
And Brown comes out and takes a great mark, and he is killing Anthony Danaher.
Gavin Crosisca. Well, my first memory of Gavin was at training, and it was that incident that Keith Burns alluded to. It was midway through the 1986 season. It was the first year that Gavin had actually come to Victoria from Queensland, and he'd had a horrid run. He hadn't played, had groin injuries, had a broken thumb, I can recall. And I can remember, in fact, the club, of course, wasn't travelling too well financially at the start of 1986, if you may recall. And I think there was a $20,000 transfer fee that had to be paid for the club to keep or to put Gavin Crosisca on our list, or to get a permit for him to play. And I can remember kind of the conversation about should we pay the money. I mean, Gavin's come down from Queensland, but no one's seen him play because he'd been injured up until the midway point of the 1986 season. And I think it really became a question of principle, and well, partly a question of principle and partly the fact that Gavin was a fantastic trainer. Even though he hadn't played football, he seemed to train like a running player should. That is, when the ball is flowing from the defence into attack, he would run with the ball through half-back and through the half-forward line. And I suppose it was the principle that he'd done his bit, even though he'd been injured. Second, that he looked to me, he might have something to offer, that the club decided to find the money when money wasn't that readily available in 1986. So that's my first memory of Gavin.
Well, when he was with us, he was one of the best workhorses that we did have. Always tried hard, and in football, the ones who work hard and try and are willing to keep going are the ones who are successful. And I'm not surprised at all he's so successful in today's football.
Collingwood should be thankful that the Brisbane Bears did not come into existence a few years earlier than they did. If they had, the Pies may have been denied the services of one of the game's most respected defenders.
I signed with Collingwood at the end of '84 after Teal Cup carnivals and so forth. And there was just a little bit of talk about it. At the end of the next year, that's when they were more or less starting to come in, but I'd already signed with Collingwood, so there was no point even thinking about it. And I was quite happy to come down to Collingwood. I actually did sign a contract with Carlton at first, which gave me a two-week clause where I could get out of it if I changed my mind. So I did actually change my mind and end up going with Collingwood. But you know, the Bears, I don't think were a real major factor there. And plus, also, it was going to be a learning process for them early in their career, the club's career, I suppose. So it was a lot more beneficial for me to come down and play in Melbourne.
Crosisca came to Victoria Park from Queensland club Western Districts. Like fellow 10-year players Gavin Brown and Mick McGuane, he was part of the Collingwood under-19s premiership team in 1986.
Yeah, Gav was a bloke that straight away you could see his work ethic was there. He was one guy that I lived with in 1980, 86 and 87 when he came down from Brisbane with his mum, Kay Crosisca. We developed a rapport straight away, merely because we were involved in a situation that was both foreign to us. We needed that family orientation to build us, knowing that we were going to hopefully trying to achieve one common goal, and that was to play league footy with Collingwood.
He was blooded with 7 senior games in 1987, and by the next season had become a regular fixture in the senior team, managing 23 games.
Quick kick, here's a chance. Gavin Crosisca, lovely bounce, open goal, right through the middle.
Fairly tough year, I think, actually on the whole club, because it was a really large rebuilding sort of year for the guys. As you said, there was, I think, from the 86 under-19 grand final, I think there was probably up to 10 guys that played senior football that year. So that's a lot of kids sort of playing senior football. So, but it was a learning curve. The first game, Kappa took a few big marks on me, and we got flogged a couple of times. So we were thrown straight into it pretty quickly, which I think's probably helped our footy, in the long run.
In these years, he played mainly off half-back, but with forays on the ball and occasional bursts up forward. He combined the best old-fashioned defence, strong tackling, close checking, emphatic punching from behind, with an attacking flair that often saw him willing to run up the ground and create an extra attacking option.
Gav's awesome just in his approach to the game, his attack on the footy, and then, if his opponent or anyone else's opponent's got the footy, just his attack on them is second to none. I think perhaps his rugby background has helped him there. He has this technique of just completely watching the hips, and no matter how many times the coaches tell us to do it, just our background of chasing the footy teams to come into play. But Gav's, he's fantastic in that area. His tackling is just amazing.
I was all my junior football and senior football in Queensland. I played at centre forward, so I was more of a sort of medium-sized running centre half forward, and then came down here, and I think lack of pace found me out a bit down here in the forward line, and Lee Matthews put me in the back line, and I think it was more of just the running. I'm a 200-metre strider more or less, so it was sort of running straight, and from the back line suited my style of play a lot more. So, and I think training hard and that sort of thing, I think Lee saw that in me. There was a decision I had to make actually early in my career whether to pay a transfer fee for me. I think it was only about 20,000, but I hadn't played a game or whatever up until halfway through '86, and they decided that, or Lee decided that I'd trained well enough, and he sort of liked the way I'd trained, and they took the gamble on me. So
this style of play brought him third in Collingwood's best and fairest in 1989. It also saw him play a vital role in the team's premiership success of 1990, playing in 23 games and kicking 22 goals.
Is that holding the ball? They're making a lot of mistakes, Essendon, due to the pressure. Crosisca, an open goal. Gavin Crosisca's kicked it. Great goal to the Magpies.
Still always enjoyed early on, especially kicking a goal, even from half-back.
Well, yeah, you probably enjoy kicking a goal from the back line more than what you would kicking 3 or 4 from playing in the forward line. So it's it's a good effort to sort of run down the field and create an option to help your teammates out, and to kick a long goal is always good in front of a big crowd.
He was superb in defence in those years, where his tackling was quite astonishing. But he also became a dangerous goal kicker, most often from around 50 metres on his heavily favoured left foot.
The highlight of anyone's career, I suppose, is going to be winning a flag, but 6 years on, having not done it again or not even been there again, does it even mean more to you now?
Well, that's what you try and tell the young guys now, which guys would have been trying to tell us, that one's not enough. You've got to you play football for that exact reason, to win premierships, and sometimes when you're younger, you miss that point. You're playing to get a game, and you're happy just sort of filling the senior spots, where if you can teach the young guys to sort of get out there and to get more out of themselves, it's more beneficial for themselves and also the side. But I think that's the thing, us older guys now have got a few years left hopefully, and we want to make everyone count.
The hangover that engulfed Collingwood after that drought-breaking premiership has been well documented. Gavin Crosisca suffered more than most. By his own admission, he really lost his way after 1990, losing both focus and discipline.
Do you feel that now, that for that period you just got too wrapped up in it?
Oh no, I don't think so. I think for the couple of months after in 1990, at the end of the year we did, but when it came back around to training again, we were all back into training hard and you know, had the next year in our minds, but I think it was just a mental letdown, as in we relaxed mentally. It's not something you know consciously what you're doing, but subconsciously you've sort of relaxed a little bit and you just can't play football under those conditions.
In 1993, he could manage only 12 games, the victim of regular injuries and an apparent questionable attitude. At the end of that year, his football career was very much at the crossroads.
Just along with that lost his way quote, there was the one that he's at, whether he believes it or not, at the crossroads after those couple of bad years with injuries. Did you have any doubts that Gavin would get through that and continue to be a player with Collingwood?
Oh, no doubt. I think, like Gav stipulated, the thing that is difficult to grab hold on in playing league footy is to be a consistent performer. Now, I know I've been through this situation myself in that certain times throughout my career I've had a little bit of complacency of attitude and been a little bit inconsistent in performance because of that. And Gav, through maturity or immaturity at that stage, probably did the same. And you know, I think it's part of growing up. You listen, you learn, and you develop the right methods and the right habits when you know that the time's right. And knowing the man that he is, he couldn't accept being touted as a has-been or touted as a bloke that had one or two good years and it's going to fall away. I knew because of his work ethic's always been so great and his attitude to be competitive has been so good, we knew he'd come back.
I suppose he was at the crossroads for him. I mean, he could have gone and played the way he was and been a constructive player for the club because he's always a good player. But now he really has turned it around. He's very out in the track. He's very professional. He's one of the best workhorses out in the track. His voice is terrific. When he gets out on the footy ground and the training track, he's just switched on, and it's like he's got a real passion for the game now. I'm not saying he didn't have back then, but now you can really tell just around the place before training. He really has turned it around, and it's almost like he just woke up one day and thought, you know, this is it. I've really got to. I can either be an average player or a good player for the team, or I can be a great player. And he's just gone ahead in leaps and bounds, particularly last year and again this year.
Typically, Crosisca responded in a positive fashion. He set out to prepare himself better, both physically and mentally, than ever before. His physical preparation was intense and his application first class.
Was it a mental approach at 94 to really knuckle down, or was it just the fact that the injury stopped and you could actually do some hard work?
Yeah, a bit of an attitude turnaround, settling down at home also. When you've got a wife or girlfriend or whatever at home to go home to, you like going home. It's not like you need to go out and chase girls or, you know, that sort of thing. So it's a matter of, you know, priorities and working out what you want, and I decided that was what I wanted. And it helps your footy, you sort of concentrate more on your football and the fitness and training and that sort of thing, and it went all right. I gradually got fitter during 94, and last year I don't think I missed a training session, so it was, fitness-wise, I was at my peak last year. So
it was a more mature footballer from 94?
Well, yeah, that's what I think it is. I know people say that some players mature later than others, and, you know, in a lot of cases it's true too.
The results came in the form of his two best seasons since 1990. Playing almost exclusively out of defence, now he managed only 2 goals in 40 games. Crosisca became the club's best defender in 1994 and 1995. In the latter season, particularly, he was outstanding, leading the Copeland Trophy voting for much of the season, and eventually finishing 3rd, as well as taking out the Darren Mullane Teammate Award and the Wrecker Award for most tackles, spoils, etc.
Tackling, spoiling, those sort of things, a big part of your game?
Yeah, well, any backman's got to spoil the ball, I suppose. It's the forward, actually, he knows where he's going to lead, so he's most of the time he's going to get the front spot, but I think tackling is more just an inclination thing. It's whether you want to tackle. You know, a lot of ball getters that play football don't tackle because they want to get the ball, which is fine also, but other guys have, I don't know whether it's priorities or what, but if someone's got the ball, you've got to want to tackle them to bring them down, otherwise there's no point even trying.
Crosisca's strength, concentration and defensive skills regularly see him given the opposition's most potent forward. He's lined up on players like Ablett, Hurd and Lyon, and usually done well.
Hardest opponent?
I'd have to say Wayne Carey, but I think it was a bit of a mismatch with him. I don't think I'm the sort of player that can play on a guy of his size and strength and that, but he'd have to be, the most frightening to play on. Just because he's so big and so quick, and he, runs just as well as I do, but he's just 10, 15 kilos heavier, so the strength thing is just, it's just incredible. And Gazza Ablett last night was a bit scary also, actually, but yeah, no, I'd have to say Carey.
He can take a good mark, but it is the thumping punch-out of an opponent's hands that is his trademark. So too is the bear trap of a tackle that he lays. If he isn't the fiercest tackler in the competition, then he cannot be far behind. And there are few players in the AFL who can evade him.
Not an overly big bloke, but no doubt makes the back half walk a bit taller when he's in there.
Yeah, he is fairly big actually. He's pretty deceiving. Gav's very solid, big strong fella, and yeah, you're right. With him and Craig Kelly out there, you certainly feel secure. That's for sure.
His wrong side has always been weak, but that seems to cause him surprisingly few problems. He still likes to run forward to provide an option, but those forays have become less frequent as his defensive responsibilities have increased. Crosisca's rehabilitation as a footballer was completed when he was appointed the team's vice-captain.
And now this year, the vice-captaincy, what's that mean to Gavin Crosisca?
Oh, it's a great honour actually, considering I was deputy vice in 1990, and as I said, had a couple of lean years, and it was great for the coaching panel and those sort of guys to put that, give me that leadership role again. Actually, it was, as I said, it's a great honour, and it's good to sort of be up there.
It was acknowledgement of the leadership position he'd assumed within the team, and overdue recognition for a player who has worked hard for relatively little fanfare.
Christian can go on. Kelly gives him a lead. Brennan versus Kelly. Crosisca, left foot, another one.
How would you like to see history remember your influence at the club?
Oh, I don't know. I'd probably just as a good, honest player. I think it's the champion players. There's very few of those. So a good, hard, honest player that sort of gave his all for the club.
Handley back there, but terrific part by Gavin Crosisca.
My memories of Mick, and I mentioned about Brownie in the team meeting, that Brownie's got a fairly impassive look. Well, Mick's exactly the opposite. When we're in the team meeting and I'm talking to the players, I'm still in present tense, used to be talking to the players, Mick would subconsciously start nodding his head. Now this gave me enormous confidence, because all of a sudden I thought one player at least knows what I'm talking about. So sure, you'll be looking for this from now on.
Well, I remember one day Crackers Keenan was ruck coach and we were in the gym, and I was doing some warm-up exercise and Crackers was talking to myself, and Mickey's come in, he's got the quaddie going 10 times, $4,000, a quaddie, so he's got it for 40 grand. And he said, look, I've got to go out in the track, and I said, I've got to go out, and he goes, Crackers, you listen for the result. And he was pretty nervous, Mick, and I'm running laps, and in the warm-up before the game, before the training session, Crackers come up, he's got beaten by half a head, and I'm going to tell Mick I won. So we've told Mickey, and I've never seen Mickey train so well in all my bloody life, and this is a true story. And Mickey thought he had 40 grand in the kick. Anyway, we've got to about right near the end of the night, and Crackers has gone up to him, and we were all walking off, and Crackers gone up to him and said, Mickey, that horse got beaten by half a head. Well, I saw the jaw drop, and I thought, Jesus, this is unbelievable. And I still remember now Mickey chasing Crackers around the weights room with a 5-pound dumbbell in his hand trying to kill the bastard, you know. But that was a true story, and, as we know, Mick likes a punt, but I don't think he ever forgiven Crackers yet.
Mick McGuane has been one of the most popular players at Victoria Park ever, since he first appeared in a senior Collingwood jumper. The fans respect Gavin Brown, they admire Nathan Buckley or Sav Rocker, and they used to idolise Peter Dacos, but they simply love Mickey McGuane.
Fanatical Collingwood, always barracked for Collingwood, and hopefully one day dreamt about representing the club. But those dreams very rarely come a reality unless you do something about it. And I was just fortunate enough to get signed by Collingwood one particular night after they came and watched me play with St Pat's College against Ballarat High School. And whether it be good luck or good fortune, I happened to kick 12 goals that night and I signed at the Ballarat Post Office.
Mick is a very, very smart footballer. He knows the game of football, and I've always thought he's fantastic as an on-field influence in running the team plans, in being able to do that difficult task that players must do, which is to do their own job, but to as well be able to help other players do their own job with the positioning of them within the set plays and all those things. And Mick was exceptional in that area.
I just think I'm my own person in that I try not to be anyone different. I think that's always been important. I've been told that through my, through my parenthood and relatives and uncles and brothers. So I think it's important that you are who you are, not try to be someone else. One other thing that I've always been told is that when you meet people, you must respect them and talk to them, irrespective of what they've got to say. They might have something good to offer. And it's up to you with your own conscience to say, well, yeah, they were right, they are wrong. And all of a sudden you get a rapport because you're prepared to communicate. And if you've got those communication skills, irrespective with what part of life you're talking to, I think it does help you long term. And they're probably the two reasons as to why I may have a good rapport with Collingwood people.
Perhaps it's the honesty with which he plays, always a 100% effort. Perhaps it's his off-stated love of the club, or the slightly wild-eyed stare that reminds them of another Magpie hero, Billy Pekin. Maybe it's his easygoing country personality, or his well-publicised larrikin streak.
Mick loves being around the football club, he loves his mates, he always gets back to Ballarat when he can to see his mates from back there, which is a good thing for him. He's very closely knitted with his family also, which was a thing. I think it's for the country, being from Ballarat and that sort of thing. He's relied on his mates and his family all his life, so he still does now, I think, which is good. And a bit like Alan Richardson, they love being around the boys and going out and having a beer and having a yarn and that sort of thing.
He's very much a player's player, if you can say that. He gets on well with everyone, right through from the biggest larrikin in the club, right down to the bloke who's come in for his first game or his first training night. He makes them feel welcome, and he's very friendly, very talkative, and he's terrific with the players.
In truth, it's probably all of those, combined with a healthy dash of footballing ability and tremendous courage, which has seen him play on despite crippling groin injuries that would have stopped many lesser competitors. Whatever the reasons, there is no more popular player at Collingwood than Mickey McGuane.
Another one, and the Pies are away. Mickey McGuane bounces his way from half-back. Jarman keeps chasing. He's closing the gap. McGuane's still going. And he's done it again. What is wrong with your foot, Mickey McGraw?
I've been a believer in you never forget your grassroots people. And I love getting home to Ballarat and mixing it with me mates back home. And, I've got some real close mates up at, Warwick Nabil and St Arnaud and country towns around, Victoria. And, I think footy nowadays does require a great amount of discipline, but I think you can mix it to a degree that you have to be in control. And I've always said my time between sort of October and sort of Christmas time I enjoy, because that's the only opportunity I get to catch up with me mates who have helped me through and been a part of my career. And come football season, sort of January, I sort of switch off, and I become pretty disciplined because I take my footy very seriously, merely because I like competing and try to get the best out of myself to become a consistent performer.
Again, swoop on it, McGuane. Beautiful kick by McGuane.
He won recognition soon after his senior debut. He played only 3 games in his first season in 1987. But in his second, finished equal runner-up in the club's Best and Fairest award.
Crawley battling his heart out. The hand pass, though, straight to Scott Russell. Back to McGuane. Cleverly done, Mick McGuane. Getting round onto the right foot. 2 bounces, 40 metres out at open goal. What a great goal by Mick McGuane.
I probably knew I had to really maintain a level of fitness that's required. So I really worked hard in 1988, trained extremely hard. Worked on my endurance running, and merely because you have a meeting with the coach after the year, so a retrospective meeting, and then they look for the future and they'd see the coaching staff admit what they think's wrong with your game, what deficiencies you may have, what you're good at. So there's a bit of pros and cons involved, and they just decided that I did need an extra workload in relation to running, because they thought that I could come off half back because my ball use was quite constructive, be able to set up on the way through, but I also had to be accountable for a direct opponent and knowing the percentages, when to run, when not to run, to set up. So that was beneficial to me, that meeting in 1987, going into the 88 season.
The other thing I think will always stick in my mind with Mick, don't care how many players have played league football, if I wanted someone to be 40 metres out, kicking for goal to win a grand final, I think Mick's the player you'd give the ball to. He was a magnificent, accurate, straight kick for goal, and I think those things stick in my mind above and beyond a lot of the other abilities that Mick has had.
A cry of ball. Mongoose tried to flick it wide. Carlton have the numbers. Madden gets the hand pass away. Caught with Scholl. They lose it to McGuane. He shoots from 48 metres. Yes!
In those early days, he was used mainly as a running, attacking halfback flanker and created problems for opposition sides, not just with his willingness to run, but with the quality of his possessions. He rarely wasted a disposal and set up many goals from defence in those early years. It soon became clear, however, that his sublime footballing talents demanded he be brought closer to the action. So he began to spend more time on the ball, usually ruck roving. Here, his ability to find space and read the play was especially valuable, and he played a vital role in the 1990 flag.
Salmon back there. Christian McGuane, left foot, and it's a goal.
Personally speaking, I started off the first sort of 4 games on the bench in 1990, and that was a desire that sort of didn't feel too at home with, but I think it just added a extra dimension in that when you get out there and you play alongside the likes of Shaw and people who are real intimidators who get involved in a contest by imposing their wills, I think I learned a lot from guys like that as well, because you do get involved with this. That year I played on the Watsons and the quality players who do lead you to the footy because their experience have told them that they're going to do that. And when you play on the calibre of those blokes, you learn where to run, how to cut the ground, and when you do get it, how to use the ball fairly effectively and kick to percentage spots. And they're things you've got to learn as a player. You've got to take into account who you're playing on, what their strengths are, and hopefully visualise after a game what they did and what you could have done to negate them, and they just add to your strings if you're prepared to learn. And you obviously had learnt, and the reward was a premiership. What was that like? Oh, it was just a feeling I'll never forget. After 32 years, the euphoria that surrounded the club was just amazing in that, they even questioned us to the degree going into that contest that, the collywobbles are going to exist again. And, that to me was a myth, because you can't control of what the last people who were involved in a grand final, what they did and what they should have done. We were a group that were committed. We were solely focused, and we believed in ourselves. I think that was the greatest learning curve that I've been involved in a football club, was because that year we developed a camaraderie. We had the Bankses, the Mullanes, the Dacoses, the Shaws, who were soon the seniority of the group. But the next level of players was the Monkhursts, the Browns, the Crosiscas, those types of players who were really looking for a taste of it. And all of a sudden you curb this experience with this relative inexperience who wanted success. We got the perfect ingredient, and that particular year really did show that. And we were very confident going into the game. We know we'd done the work. We knew we'd had the right preparation going into September, and on the day, as history tells you, we were successful because of those particular starting points.
In 1991, his game fell away, however, as the premiership hangover took its toll. McGuane's preparation was substandard, and he missed much of the season through injury. It looked as if Mick had lost his way, and it took the tragic death of his good teammate Darren Mullane to get him back on track. McGuane was deeply affected by Mullane's death and immediately vowed to dedicate season 1992 to the memory of his former teammate.
I remember going out to the Mullane household on the, during that week leading up to the funeral, and I just committed myself to Bob and Denise in that, 1992 was not going to be for me, it was going to be for Pants. And I set myself standards that particular pre-Christmas training in that I wanted to train as consistent and as often, as hard as I possibly could. So I approached Ray Giles and he said, I'll get you as fit as what hands can make you. And at Christmas time I was just unbelievably fit. I was doing 9, 12, 14 sessions per week, and it was just a disciplined course I took going into that 1992 season. And it was, it was great, and I'm honoured in saying that I dedicated that year to Pants, and it was great to come out with a Copeland Trophy because I dedicated it to him.
With his commitment to the game and to himself restored, McGuane played the best football of his career, winning the Copeland Trophy. Just as importantly, he carried the form into 1993 as well, winning a second Copeland.
Yeah, it was a terrific effort. The first Copeland he won, he had a tremendous year. He really set himself for the year. He very professional. He got off the grog. It's just little things like after a game he'd be icing every sore spot. He trained hard early in the week. He just did everything that he thought was the right thing to do. And it showed out in the football field. He virtually, I don't think he played. He might have played 1 or 2 average games, but the rest of the year was just great every week.
I did set myself that goal in trying to win back-to-back merely because of that particular situation. I think naturally the team cause is priority, but I think you also have to set yourself individual goals, and that was one individual goal I set myself that year, in that I wanted to win the Copeland for myself, and I ventured on to do that, and that was satisfying.
By this stage, he was arguably the most important player in the Collingwood lineup. His skill, vision, composure and willingness to run all day made him the key to Collingwood's highly regarded midfield. He became an important goal kicker too, notching 51 majors in those 2 seasons. Though usually tagged, he was occasionally given a role on opposition playmakers like Greg Williams or Chris Lewis, frustrating them with a combination of close checking, annoying verbals and a willingness to run off and become an attacking player himself.
Basically you're trying to get into their minds, because I think the game of footy now is the mental approach probably overcomes the physical approach, because every other club in the competition does exactly the same sort of work ethic. Their training methods are basically the same. They train as often as what other clubs do. So the physical preparation is about on par. But the mental approach, I think, is a little bit different. I think it's a psychological game now, in that if you can explore a weakness or an inexperience in someone else's mind, and you can sort of use that to your advantage, maybe a free kick down the field, and we kick a goal, little small percentage things like that, it does benefit your side. And, Tony Shaw was one of the greatest players at that particular part of the game, but he was still in control of the contest, and I think that's one thing that you have to learn.
Mick McGuane has been an outstanding player for Collingwood, one of only 9 players in the club's history to have won back-to-back Copelands. His efforts have won him a special place in the hearts of Magpie fans, and his achievements have secured an equally special place for him in the club's history books.
Collingwood lead by 8 points. They're going to get the ball away from the centre again through Montport, and McGuane gets past Brown. They're lifting the Pies. They can sense it. First 15 minutes ordinary, but since then they've been good. McGuane's had 5 bounces, nearly get another one. Round he goes, in he goes to an open goal. Phil Manassa, stuffed by Mick McGuane. Goal of the year.
You won't see better than that.
How would you like history to look upon Mick McGuane when you've finished here at Collingwood?
A bloke that sort of gave his all. Every time I cross the line, I try to give. And the most important challenge I think any player's got in their makeup is to become a consistent performer, merely because I think there's no point going out last week and getting your 40 touches, and then 7 days later you go out and get your 5. The player himself has got to really minimise the area between top and bottom performance. Now, if he does that, he becomes consistent. Now, if everyone else has got that same attitude, across the board, the group has to become consistent, and if you've got consistency within a group, you become successful. So I think that's the initial starting point any individual has to have to be an ideal competitor. You've got to try to get consistency in your game, because long term that'll affect the side's contribution and how good and competitive the club will be.
2 bounces, 40 metres out and open goal. What a great goal by Mick McGuane.
Well, Richo came through unusual sources. Back in 1986, 1987, when the recruiting rules were a fair bit looser than they are in the 90s, Billy O'Keefe, who was our recruiting officer at that point, had a whole squad of players that had maybe been tried by other league clubs or out of zones. Basically, they were free agents, so you could get this group of players down, train them over the summer, and you could put them on the list at the end of that summer period if they looked like they were good enough. We actually termed this troop, I think Billy termed the troop, F Troop. That was the name of this group. They didn't train with the senior group. They had to go and train separately just for the numbers. Mick Gafer, in fact, came out of F Troop the year before, and that's how Richo started his time at Collingwood.
Richo, the Dalmatian. Well, I call him the Dalmatian because one of his schoolmates told me that's what he was called because of his freckles. And one night at training when I was playing with Richo, I went up to him and I said, how you going, Dalmatian? And he couldn't believe it. He said, where'd you get that, you know? Because it was a primary school joke that everybody gave to him. But the big thing was with Richo and Monkey, I had an extension done at home, and Monkey was the plumber and Richo was the electrician, and they stuffed everything up. It was shocking. They ate more, I think. Really, I believe that if I told them I'm going to take $1,800 off the food bill, off the total bill because of the food, and they just ate all day, and my missus kept feeding them. I couldn't believe that. But the big one was he put a light in my spa. You know, the spa light went out, and he put a light in my spa, and every time I went to turn the spa on, the front garage door would go up and down. So he wasn't the greatest electrician I've ever seen, I can tell you that too.
Oh, his sheer persistence. He was also very, very committed. He knew exactly where he wanted to go. He was convinced that because he loved footy so much that he wanted to go on and do it. There are many things about Alan Richardson that stick in my mind, but one of them, the most important thing, was his just absolute determination to continue with it and to do well in it.
Alan Richardson has had to battle harder than most for the rewards that have come his way in football. Yet, cruelly, fate denied him what may well prove to be his one crack at football's ultimate reward, a place in a premiership team.
He broke his collarbone, cracked his collarbone in the second semi-final, I think it was, if my memory serves me correctly. And of course, 2 weeks later, the grand final. Last training session, the Thursday night before the grand final. And Richo hoped, I think more than thought, that maybe his broken collarbone had miraculously healed. So he actually trained that Thursday night. And I suppose I'll always remember the fact there's 10 or 12,000 people at training that night, and all those people were about to view the fitness test, which I had to try and, well, simple really. I had to either break Richo down or not break him down. It was really one or the other. I mean, I had to make sure that whatever happened that Thursday night, that anything that could happen on the following Saturday happened on that Thursday night. So I started to, we just sort of had a couple of the body-to-body duels, and I was pretty scared I might get hurt myself, I can tell you. And eventually, I said to Richo after just a couple of body-to-body clashes, Richo, I'm not too comfortable doing this in front of 10,000 people, because every time our bodies clashed, there was a cheer when Richo got up and was okay. And I said, I think we'll just leave it the way it is, and we'll look at you again tomorrow afternoon in private. And of course, as it turned out, that Richo sort of, I suppose that fitness test, I think the Friday morning, Richo basically said, no, I know it's no good because it's, you know, it's sore enough as it is, so there's no way I can get into a game.
I really was ruled out once I'd broken the collarbone in the, you know, in the second semi-final. But I suppose I just wanted to prove to myself that I definitely was, you know, not going to make the side. And of course it came down to that last Thursday prior to the grand final. Yeah, it was basically a few tackling exercises with Lee. Everything was going well. I'd had a couple of injections prior to the game and was pretty heavily strapped up just to see if I could get through. Lee came up and said, look, you know, we've got to do a bit of a test. I'll throw the ball, or someone will throw the ball and I'll come in and tackle you. And of course, you know, in when you're tackling, you obviously open yourself up. And the first two went fine, and the last one, as I've opened up to tackle him, as Lee's running past, he's changed direction and just run through me, so to speak. And I still didn't feel too bad on the night, probably because I was full of painkiller injections, I suppose. But yeah, the following day, Lee and I decided that it wasn't going to be right, and unfortunately, I missed the game.
Richardson is a case of a discard who made good through sheer hard work. In his first crack at league football, he made it as far as North Melbourne's reserves team before the Roos cut him from their list.
Initially, I was training down at Collingwood. Back then, it was zones. Unlike today, it's the draft. I lived in Ferntree Gully, which was a North Melbourne area, and I came down here to train. Barry Price got me down here to train. He was then the coach at East Burwood, the senior coach, and filled out the appropriate forms to play in the reserves here. And then when Collingwood lodged them, evidently North Melbourne had beaten them by a couple of days. So it was disappointing then to have to go to North Melbourne. But in answering your question, I was most disappointed when things didn't work out there at North Melbourne.
No other AFL club picked him up, so Richardson returned to play with East Burwood in the EDFL under former Magpie champion Barry Price.
I can remember having a chat to him, and he was very constructive with his advice. Basically pushed me on to, he thought I had something that, still to offer at league level, and he certainly encouraged me in that direction. And yeah, once I got the opportunity again, I wasn't going to let it slip.
Richardson to full forward. Tony Francis runs in the goal. Oh, it's a goal, I think.
In 1986-87, Collingwood was in rebuilding mode, an environment that saw many young and previously rejected players given an opportunity.
Richo came across after North got rid of him, and he trained with us in a squad we called F Troop, which was the leftovers, and he came from F Troop to making the seconds, winning the best and fairest, and being just a great clubman, and his nickname Citizen, he's a model citizen, and he's a great fella.
I was quite close to Richo and Paul Rosonico, Mick Gaffer. I had a good association with them guys merely because two of them came from other clubs, Richo and Gay from North Melbourne, and Rizza was just a likeable bloke. He was like a magnet. He had a personality that you'd want to get involved with, and those three particular guys stick readily in my mind from that F Troop situation. And when you see the work ethic that the Gaffers and the Richardsons had, probably to a lesser degree Rizzo didn't have, you knew that they'd try to put their hand up and be a part of the list come not the 1987 season.
Gee, I can't remember. There was heaps of us. There was I think it was about 80 players in F Troop that were trying to get into a group of 50. So, as you can appreciate, there was a lot of kids. The year previous to my year, Mickey Gaffer actually came through F Troop, and we all know the great player Mick turned out to be. But I actually played the first year I come from F Troop, played a couple of senior games, and then found myself in F Troop again. I actually got delisted at the end of '87, and then went back into F Troop, which was most disheartening, but certainly made me keen and made me a lot harder to try and prove people wrong, I suppose.
Richardson's came in 1987, but he managed only 2 senior games that year. 4 the next, a year in which he won the reserves best and fairest, and no games in 1989.
It's always something that the players don't want to win the seconds best and fairest. Did you think perhaps you were gone again?
Oh no, not really. I mean, the club had been pretty positive. I think the fact that Lee Matthews was coach certainly did help, because coming from Hawthorn, they'd had a very rich tradition of playing players for a long period of time in the reserves. The Dippy Dominicos. I think Michael Tuck might have even played. Paul Deere was one of more recent times, and I think that helped me. I think the fact that Lee didn't necessarily need someone to be outstanding straight away, and perhaps saw something, for future years.
Despite his poor return in those years and the doubts of many supporters, Richardson was kept on Collingwood's list. His work ethic and attitude high on the list of reasons why. In 1990, to the surprise of many, he went from fringe player to regular senior selection, managing 18 games for the year.
That's a good long kick under the conditions. Richardson and Bradley. And Richardson, great mark!
Certainly was, Pete.
Well, you would think so from there. And he gets it.
Peripheral players that sort of list between sort of 16 and 25, they might not get an opportunity to play 4 quarters regularly. So if they only play a quarter and a half, similar to sort of Brett James nowadays, they've got to go up and back so they can maintain a sort of certain fitness level. And that's probably the situation Richo was in. Until he became a consistent contributor, playing consistently and playing consistently well, he was not going to be given his chance. And in 1990 he was given that, and you know, we all seen what a great year he had.
He, you know, 1990 his final series was just absolutely, you know, it was a great final series by him, and you know, it was just a terrible tragedy that that happened. Unfortunately, you know, he certainly would have played in that team, and obviously would have been, you know, one of the fellas rejoicing the premiership with us. And you know, for a bloke who's had that happen to him, you know, you wouldn't even know. He's not bitter at all, and he's just come out and you know, I got tremendous respect for Richo. I think he's a tremendous player. Very when he's going, he's as good as you know, he's as good as anyone really. He's and for him to turn around and you know, and back up the next year, and as I said before, you wouldn't even know that happened to him.
Sadly, though, he missed the one that counted, the grand final. He chipped a collarbone in the second semi against Essendon, and though named in the grand final 20, was a late withdrawal when he failed a prolonged exacting fitness test. It was a cruel blow for Richardson, who'd become a valued member of the team and would have been a certain starter but for the injury. Richardson recovered from that disappointment, however, and in the years that followed, established himself as one of the quiet achievers of the Collingwood lineup. Playing in either a back pocket or half-back flank, he became a consistent and reliable player.
Yeah, I'm happy with that. I like having a job to do, whether it be in the back line or as a defensive midfielder. My father always says I tend to get a little bit lost when playing midfield, just trying to get a kick myself. He thinks I'm a bit of a thick head and need someone to lead me to the ball. I don't know whether that's totally true, but I really do find that I concentrate a lot harder, both in the back half and also, you know, when I'm playing a defensive role on someone.
Injury restricted him to just 11 games in 1991, but in 1992-93 he bounced back with his 2 best years in footy. In those 2 years he played 41 of a possible 43 games, finishing 5th in the Copeland Trophy in 1992 and equal 4th in 1993. Injuries have restricted Richo's input in the past couple of seasons. So much so that he's only brought up his 100th game in 1995, his 9th season of league football. It was an honour no one would have begrudged this honest battler, who's overcome more than his fair share of disappointments to eke out a fine career at Victoria Park.
A quiet achiever basically means someone that you know, just went about his work, perhaps had the respect of his teammates more importantly than anyone else, and you know, that's something that if I was to, you know, walk away with footy and people to say that you know, they really respected the way I went about my footy, I'd be most happy with that.
Richardson and Bradley, and Richardson, great mark!
Oh yeah, I've known the 4 of them for the whole 10 years they've been at Collingwood, and had a lot of great fun with them. Been through down times when they first started, been through the premierships, you know, when they won the premiership, and as they're getting on now in their veteran stage, I'm still with them.
I think we're a chance to finish well up the ladder this year, and it's going to be with the help of these fellows. Unfortunately, Mick's got a problem. Alan is playing very well in the reserves, and Gavin Crosisca is having a great year. And Gavin Brown, of course, we know with his courage just how good a player he is. So I believe if we're going to finish certainly in the top 4, we would need the help of these 4 players. They're very important to us.
What are they like with the younger guys? Are they great leaders?
Yes, off the field, it's a very tight group of guys, and the experience, the comedian Mick, down to the more dour type person in Gavin Brown, they're a good foursome.
And just on behalf of the 4 players, we'd certainly like to thank the Collingwood Football Club for giving us the opportunity to, or for the start in football, and obviously the opportunity to keep playing with the club for over these 10 years. It means a great deal to us. Obviously, with the Collingwood Football Club being such a great club as well, it's certainly a great honour, and I'm sure I'm speaking on behalf of the four of us. It's a great honour to play with the Collingwood Football Club, and thank you very much for the night. Thank you.
For Mick McGuane, it was a poignant night. As only Mick could, he left his hospital bed, where he was being treated for a serious groin injury, to join his mates. Mick wouldn't have had it any other way.
Yeah, no, it's terrific. You know, it's always welcoming to be involved with a group of people who you spend a lot of time with, and that's mainly the Collingwood players. But the affiliation you get with supporters has just been terrific since I've been at Collingwood. And you know, to hold something like this, naturally, I'm very satisfied. And the support I've been granted and given over a long period of time at the club's, hasn't been warranted to a degree. But it's just great when you walk in here and see such a massive people who all support you. Finally. Behind every success story, I suppose you need a family, and I just can't speak any highly than the McGuane family. They've, with Dad over there and Mum, see me Uncle Gavin and Terry, Troy, Sharpie, my sister Suzanne, they're all there, and just to be a part of something I wanted to do for a long, long time, and that was to play footy with Collingwood, and they've backed me to the hilt, and this isn't for me, guys, it's for us, and just thanks very much for being a part of it.
Your hope and pray that come a day you'll see that rain come through. With every passing moment, you begin to understand that you're bound for glory land. With a hunger in your heart and with fire in your soul, with passion rising high, you know that you can reach your goal. Reach your goal, believe what you do, and you've the strength to see it through. On the road to glory land, glory land, glory land, and I say glory land, in glory land, it's in your heart, it's in your hand, glory land, glory land, you're here in glory land. This is glory land.
A clash of bodies. The ball breaks free. It's all Collingwood. Crosisca heads towards
As the day gets ever closer, you are reaching for the sky. The flames that burn inside are the flames that never die. When you start to believe, it's in your heart, it's in your hand. You know this is glory land. And I say, glory land, in glory land. It's in your heart, it's in your hand.
So apart from that, in summary, just the four of them together, as I say, I've shared a really big part of my life with those four guys. I was speaking to David Parkin the other day, and it's a funny thing when you get older. You're the first to reunions and the last to leave, because all you've really got is good memories. And these four players I've shared some fantastic memories with, and I hope sometime down the future, when their football's finally finished, we can share them with each other. Thank you.